large gatherings and close quarters. If you have a cough, fever, shortness of breath, or sore throat, stay away from others even if they're in your same household. Doing your part will save lives. Please visit floridahealth.gov and the CDC websites to stay informed. The Florida Department of Health wants to stress the importance of speaking with your healthcare provider. It's a bad idea to self-diagnose and tell a healthcare provider, I have COVID-19, I need to get tested. A healthcare provider may not take you seriously if you do. If you have a fever, cough, or trouble breathing, call a healthcare provider and describe your symptoms. Your healthcare provider will then help you with your next steps. To be safe, you should avoid close contact with others, especially those in your household, until you know more. Please visit floridahealth.gov and the CDC websites to stay informed. If you live alone and become sick during a COVID-19 outbreak, you may need help. Ask family, friends, and other healthcare providers to check on you during an outbreak. Stay in touch with family and friends with chronic medical conditions. Please visit floridahealth.gov and the CDC websites to stay informed.
The Florida Department of Health has teamed up with Hillsborough County government and other public health and safety agencies to address any impacts coronavirus may have on our local community. Not everything is known about the coronavirus yet, but the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has narrowed down key symptoms of the virus: fever, cough, and shortness of breath. The CDC says these symptoms may even appear 2 to 14 days after exposure to the virus. If you experience these symptoms, you're urged to stay home and call your doctor. It's important to know the difference between symptoms of the coronavirus and other illnesses. The CDC says people who have the flu will often feel some or all of these symptoms: fever or chills, cough, sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle or body aches, headaches, fatigue, allergies. The common symptoms of seasonal allergies include sneezing and an itchy, runny, or congested nose, itchy, red, watering eyes, wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, cough, raised, itchy, red rash, swollen lips, tongue, eyes, or face, dry, red, and cracked skin. You should call your doctor if you develop symptoms and have been in close contact with a person known to have COVID-19 or have recently traveled from an area with widespread or ongoing community spread of COVID-19. We encourage you to visit floridahealth.gov for up-to-date information and tips.
The Florida Department of Health is working around the clock to identify those who are most at risk of contracting COVID-19. We are
Morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Board of County Commissioners meeting to order. We're going to have the invocation and pledge given by our chaplain, Commissioner Stacy White. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During these challenging times and with us having to meet virtually, Commissioner Miller, I'm just thankful that you have ask that we have some normalcy to this meeting and it be just as normal as possible. So we will be doing the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation this morning. I will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe some of you may be viewing this in a format where you'll have an image of an American flag automatically populate your screen. Some of you may be viewing it in a format where you have a link available for the American flag. I'll give you a moment to activate that link if you need to. And for those of you that are seeing an image of me, I have an American flag here behind me that I'll be saluting. So at this time, if you're able, I ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, please join me in the invocation. Heavenly Father, I just pray that you will guide us through these challenging times. I feel in many ways that you are speaking to us during this pandemic. And at this time, I just would like to ask for your blessings for those that are hurting right now, for those perhaps without a job, for those who have experienced the worst of this and perhaps lost a friend or a loved one to this virus. I just ask that you will comfort them, guide them. Lord, I also want to give thanks and ask for blessings for our healthcare professionals, first responders, members of our armed forces, and many, many other people who have to get out and continue to work to keep this country moving forward, even during this time of crisis. Lord, I give all of these thanks and ask for all of these blessings in your heavenly name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner White, for that the Pledge of Allegiance and that prayer. We appreciate it very much, and specifically for those who are putting their lives on the line for us each and every day. We thank you for that. We have no proclamations and commendations today, so we move to changes to the agenda. Mr. Merrill.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. We have a few changes to the agenda, beginning with an item pursuant to Rule 13 in the Rules of Order. That's item F4, Commissioner Kemp's item, asking to receive a report from the county attorney explaining what activities are prohibited under the EPG's curfew order. We have one off the agenda item, which is item F3, Commissioner Miller's item, directing the county attorney's office to bring back an opinion, which actually they have prepared the opinion, and whether land use meetings and zoning hearing master, land use hearing officer public hearings can be conducted virtually, and to identify risks associated with holding virtual quasi-judicial land use proceedings. We have one deferral, which was Commissioner Miller's item. That was an item concerning an amendment to Rule 11 of the Board's Rules of Orders, Board's Rules of Order. That's being deferred to a date to be determined. We have one revision, which is item A18. That was to approve the third modifications to agreements with the Life Enrichment Center, Hispanic Services Council, and Corporation to Develop Communities of Tampa Bay, and the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association. The correction there was just a Scrivener's error to include a reference to a board document. We have no items removed for separate vote. We have no items removed for highlighting. We do have one item removed from consent by Commissioner Overman for discussion. That is item A7, which is to request a public hearing be set for May 6th at 10 a.m. to consider an ordinance amending section 111 of the county's code to allow the irrigation of new and existing lawns and landscaping in South County service area during a single period of time during the day. And as I said, Commissioner Overman removed that for discussion. We have 3 time certains. Beginning at 10 a.m. is Commissioner Smith's item F2, which pursuant to Rule 11 of the board's rules, to rescind the vote of the board taken at the April 1st meeting and set a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance for May 4th at 6 p.m. At 10:30 is item E1. That's the special appearance by John Flanagan, CEO of CareerSource, to provide an update on the current intake and placement statistics for unemployed individuals. That relates to item B2, which will be heard at the same time. B2 is to approve the Tampa Bay Workforce Alliance CareerSource 4-year local area workforce plan of strategies and goals. Those are the changes to the agenda.
Move the changes.
A motion by Commissioner Merman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner White to approve the changes. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Miller,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp, Merman,
Yes.
Overman,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. We're now moving to public comment. The board welcomes comments from citizens about any issue or concern. Your opinions are valued in terms of providing input to the board members. However, it is requested at the same time when you address the board that comments are not directed personally against a commissioner or a staff member, but rather directed at an issue. This provides a mutual respect between the board member and the public. The board has set aside a 45-minute period in the morning immediately following changes to the agenda for public comment. At the discretion of the chair, the board may again hear public comment at the end of the meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak during the meeting will be able to do so by completing a form, and we know right now that's a little difficult by completing the online public comment form at https://www.hillsboroughcounty.org/en/government/meeting-speak-at-a-virtual meeting. So that's where we are with the public comment. We have a timer there that somehow, some way will let you know when you have 30 seconds left to speak, and then we'll let you know when your time is up. Hope we have no difficulties this morning. One of the things we have to realize, we have almost 3 hours of people signed up to speak for public. We will not get to everyone today, this morning. So at the end of the meeting, I'll go back through the list for those who weren't able to speak this morning to be able to speak after we finish our regular meeting this morning. So I want to let you know that. So we're at 3 hours, so we won't get to everyone this morning. If we're ready to go, first speaker is David Mechanic.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, I'm here. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this is David Mechanic. I spoke, this is regarding item F2, and I spoke on April 1st, and I'll try not to repeat myself, but I am here to encourage the board to place the transportation surtax to adopt an ordinance and place that matter on the agenda as was originally proposed by Commissioner Miller, I think back a month or two ago. As we know, the majority of the citizens voted to support a 1-cent transportation surtax in order to provide additional funding for roads and transit services in Hillsborough County. I would just like to point out that I realize that there's a concern that's been expressed because of the financial hardships that may be created by the coronavirus. I would just like to point out that if in fact that is true, we could find that many of our citizens are more in need of transit service than they were before. if they've been unemployed and are now seeking new employment, transit service may be the only method by which these people can apply for and then ultimately go to their jobs. So I would just urge the board to move forward. I recognize that you will have an option to pull the item in August if it is deemed appropriate at that time, but I would urge the board to move forward now so that we have an opportunity to have this on the ballot this November. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rick Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to all. My name is Rick Fernandez, 2906 North Elmore Avenue, Tampa 33602. That's in District 3, Tampa Heights. I'm here to speak on agenda item F2 called up by Commissioner Smith. I ask that you rescind your April 1 vote, set a public hearing for May 4, 2020 to address the transportation surtax ordinance. First, I would request that you note that in this position I am at common purpose with the likes of the Tampa Bay Partnership, Rick Holman's, the Tampa Downtown Partnership, and other business interests, I'm sure. This is noteworthy in that we have been adverse for over 5 years regarding the TBX Tampa Bay Next proposals. This uncommon convergence of interests offers the type of opportunity a true statesman and legislator, regardless of party, might leverage for the common good. We can hope. Second, 4 of you represent my home district, District 3, the district where I was born. I too have represented the district for several years as Civic Association President for Tampa Heights and also as MPO CAC Vice Chair, compliments, ironically enough, of appointment by Commissioner Miller. And in those capacities, I have learned much about the needs, the richness, and the promise of District 3. What I know is that we could be the most transit-rich community in the county. We are the most urban. We are diverse. In that diversity is our strength and resilience. We also include communities of concern, communities sorely in need of mobility options and access to food, health care, and jobs. The list goes on. Please do not ignore your constituents under cover of the existing health crisis. Most of us, hopefully all of us, will survive COVID-19, but we will need this funding now and for recovery. For the rest of you, transportation and transit is, or at least in our case could be, the circulatory system of a thriving metropolitan area. We must not continue to deprive our county of oxygen. In this context, failure to back up AFT funding with a November ballot measure would be not only callous, but also the height of political malpractice. Most of you do not want or deserve that legacy. Please take the opportunity today to bring us back on course. I cede the balance of my time, and thank you.
Next speaker is Bob Rolak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Dr. Bob Rorlak. I serve as the President and CEO of the Tampa Bay Chamber. On behalf of our Board of Directors and over 1,400 members, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be heard on item F2. The Tampa Bay Chamber has long believed that an accessible, affordable, and connected transit system is a catalyst for jobs. Jobs needed now more than ever before. You'll recall back in April of 2018, the Tampa Bay Chamber Board of Directors voted unanimously to support the All for Transportation initiative. And the Chamber still believes the business community has a decisive role to play yet again. Commissioners, I urge you to follow the will of the voters. Staying the course will fund transportation projects in Hillsborough County and cities, Plant City, Tampa, and Temple Terrace. The current health crisis has proven that we are all in this together, and we must work together. I ask that you please respect the will of leadership and of your constituents, the voters, and stay the course. Last year, the Tampa Bay Partnership, the Tampa Bay Economic Development Council, and the Tampa Bay Chamber filed an amicus brief in support of the All for Transportation initiative. We all did that because, as we stated in the brief, the stakes couldn't be higher. Tampa and Hillsborough County in particular, we have some of the highest and most dangerous roadways, highest fatalities and most dangerous roadways, not just among Florida, but nationwide. These roadways have caused Hillsborough County to have the highest traffic fatality rate per capita of any large county in the state, in the country rather. Hillsborough County also has the highest pedestrian fatality rate in the nation, with almost 4 pedestrian fatalities for every 100,000 residents. As we're seeing now, the Safer at Home policy has had an unintended positive consequence of fewer accidents since fewer people are on the road, but we cannot have a policy that traffic problems are best solved through health crisis. We need you to take action now for a better tomorrow. As our chairman, Mary Ann Ferentz, and I wrote in a letter to the editor earlier this week, we cannot wait while our fate is decided by the Supreme Court. That just isn't prudent. I'd like to reiterate the Chamber's support of the proposed backup plan, and I urge the Commission to schedule a public hearing to consider its passage. I understand we are certainly living in uncertain times. As you know,
Mr. Rolick, time is up,
thank you, sir, for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. Vivian Handy. Vivian Handy. Karen Kress.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing me. This is Karen Kress representing the Tampa Downtown Partnership. We are a member organization with over 240 member companies, also representing 14,000 residents of the greater downtown Tampa area and about 60,000 employees. Like the speakers before me, I'm calling in to implore you to, at this time, please leave all of our options open regarding whether to pursue a redo referendum, again, not a new tax, this November. A lot can happen in a few months, and I think it makes it's just very prudent to wait and just weigh all of our options before August. Another point is that no matter what the economic climate, safety is of utmost concern. It's horrible how many people are dying from the virus, but we can't allow, it's just not right to allow that many people to die on our roads through various crashes and driving cars, walking, biking, even transit riders. Another point would be, you have the opportunity to get creative with the spending, for instance, maybe offering free transit to those who are struggling the most. There's a lot of federal and state government programs, relief packages putting in place for those who are struggling, which should hopefully help take some of the sting out of this. So I want to make sure all the other speakers are heard. Just wanted to call in to implore you to please leave our options open this time and move forward with the virtual public hearing in May, and then again, revisit this prior to August, whether or not it makes sense to do something this November. Thank you very much for your time.
Rochelle Rubeck.
Yes, good morning. I'm also speaking on item F2, and I would keep my comments brief because a number of people have already made many of the points that I would make, which is how important it is at this time that the board have the long view, take the long view, and not be penny wise and pound foolish. We are going to be in a long period of recovery, and one of the most significant issues is going to be the issue of jobs. I view this All for transportation, transit and transportation project initiative as a jobs program at this point. We have the opportunity to put people to work on these transportation projects, and that's something that our community is going to sorely need as it recovers from this pandemic. I would also point you to the letter that our Congresswoman Kathy Castor sent. I'm sure that the board has been made aware of it, in which she pointed out that without this secure funding stream, our region, our community is not going to be in a good position with respect to receiving matching funds from the federal government for transportation. I think that that's something that we ought to pay very, very close attention to. It's going to be difficult enough for us to go through this recovery without being hamstrung by an inability to receive federal matching funds and without being in a position to offer people the jobs that these projects would grant us. So I would ask you to please take the long view, not be penny wise and pound foolish. Give us the option of having a backup plan in the event that the All for Transportation tax goes down in the Florida Supreme Court. Give us the option of having a substitute measure, a substitute referendum to vote on. If we don't need it, we can always remove it. But we need options at this point. We have to be flexible in considering how best to meet our obligations, our responsibilities, and our needs during the recovery. So thank you.
Janet Scherberger.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is Janet Scherberger, and I'm speaking on item F2. These are certainly trying times for all of us. The coronavirus threatens our health, has flattened our economy, and left many of us wondering about the future. It's hard to know what our country or community will look like when this crisis ends. And given that uncertainty, it seems best to keep options for the future open and not make a decision that could bind us for decades to come. So I urge you to, at least for now, for today, continue to support this backup plan for ensuring the will of the voters is upheld and schedule a public hearing for a transportation referendum in November. Without question, people in our community are hurting. They've lost their jobs and have no idea what will come next. But as we emerge from this crisis, we might find this transportation funding is more important than ever. It can serve as our own local stimulus package, creating jobs and making a significant investment in our future. Holding a public hearing doesn't mean the referendum will be on the ballot. We are still months away from the election, allowing plenty of time to make a final decision when we have a better sense of our new reality. But not scheduling the hearing closes the door on this option. And in these uncertain times, we need more tools in our toolbox to plan an economic recovery, not fewer. Thank you.
Jason Marlowe. Jason Marlowe. Michelle Cookson.
Good morning. Hi, Michelle Cookson, Tampa, Florida. I want to speak to item F2 and express my strong support for it, as well as many others who've called already. It is the right procedural step to take in order to support the steps that you as a body have already taken in the past year, and to ensure that the will of the voters is upheld. As many others have mentioned to you, you know the history of how we've arrived to this day and the April 1 vote that happened. I would like for you all to reconsider that action and that vote and stay the course. Rescind the vote taken by the board at the April 1 meeting and set a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance for May 4th at 6 p.m. Please take these steps to have this in place and going through the process so that it can even be on the ballot in November if necessary. Trust in and let the people decide this November whether we want to keep the tax if that is the situation we end up facing. I understand that things are at minimum a bit uncertain right now, and we're in a very challenging time. But the investment in funding transportation needs will ensure that people have a reliable commute and some means to get around, especially if they find themselves dependent on transit. And this will act as a local stimulus, providing both temporary construction jobs and long-term employment opportunity for transit operators. We are all already paying this tax. Let's keep it going so that we are best positioned to invest and ensure better times ahead as we go into a recovery period. Additionally, should the public come to a conclusion that they still don't feel this is the right time for this measure, we still have until August to remove the referendum from the ballot. Please don't squash our ability to get this in place. And then when we are hurting even more, not have any means to help support and invest in our community's infrastructure needs and also provide economic stimulus. 4 other counties in Florida have passed similar transportation tax investments, and they are moving forward. Hillsborough County must too. In the future, lives will depend on this as well. Thank you for your time.
Gwen Myers. Gwen Myers. Kent Bailey.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Kent Bailey, Chair of the Tampa Bay Sierra Club on behalf of 14,000 members and supporters. Good morning. It is said that true leadership is revealed in the crucible of a crisis. And there's no doubt that our community, our nation, in fact, the world is in the midst of an unprecedented crisis. Miles of cars waiting at food banks, drive-through testing. Who could ever have imagined we'd be facing such a thing? But I ask you, can you imagine what times like this are like for people who have no car? This crisis will pass. In its wake, true leadership will have been revealed. And in its wake, the people who needed public transit before are still going to need it, maybe even more so. The question before you today is this: will you allow the transportation surtax to be a victim of the coronavirus? Or will you stay the course you set back in February to provide a replacement referendum for funding and transportation should it be needed? This is not a new tax. This is not an increase in taxes. We've been paying this tax for the last 15 months, and you're not being asked to put anything on the ballot. As a matter of fact, depending on the decision of the court, it may never need to go on the ballot. All you are being asked to do is to preserve our options in these uncertain times. The worst thing that could possibly happen if you go forward with F2 is that the voters might get to decide again 18 by 57%. I ask you now, is that really so bad? I thank you very much.
Christina Costa.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am Christina Costa, a social enterprise small business owner-operator and active transportation advocate residing in Tampa. Thank you for ensuring public comment would be possible and work well this morning. I'm speaking regarding item F2, as everyone else before me has. As you know, significant dollars were aimed at the roadway safety design methodology, Vision Zero, and other general safety improvements that are direly needed for transit within the All for Transportation and the similar provision which you helped pass. Commissioners, I implore you to reverse your vote regarding a virtual public meeting and the possible placement of the 1 cent surtax on the November ballot. To do anything less would be inconsistent with your established values and hurt the least fiscally and financially secure members of our community. We're presently in the biggest economic meltdown since the Great Recession. Lack of safe walking and biking to and from transit and a connected system will severely hinder our ability to bounce back. The people who most need safe, affordable transportation and the ability to connect to jobs cannot wait any longer for viable, safe transportation. That concludes my remarks this morning, except that I wish you, your families, and your constituents good health until we can meet together in person in the future. Thank you.
Dana Lazarus. Dana Lazarus. Linda Salsina.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm speaking on F2. I'm Linda Salsina, and like you, I've spent a number of years in public service. In this role as an elected official, our responsibility is to the constituents, our Hillsborough County voters. The voters have spoken, but it seems as if we need to speak again. So please respect the voters' will and schedule a public hearing on the possibility of putting this referendum on the ballot. Thank you.
Laura Urena.
Good morning, Commissioners. Hope you're having a great morning. Before I begin on commenting on F2, I just wanted to, on the public record, say a big thank you to not just our military, who are frequently brought up in invocations, but for the nurses, the janitors, the grocers, all the essential workers who should be and are not currently receiving hazardous pay, and who in fact are truly on the front lines in the lifeblood of our economy and our country. So thank you to those essential workers, and thank you for making this virtual meeting possible. I just wanted, as I've mentioned, to comment that and urge you to vote yes on item F2. And I would like you to also set a public hearing on May 4th to discuss the surtax. Many who have become before me have also spoken in favor of, again, honoring the will of the voters. And I think anybody here, including conservative colleagues, all believe in democracy and freedom. So I'm calling for us to have the democracy that we engaged in honored, because this sales tax was originally passed with 57% of the vote in 2018. And I'm also asking that you honor our freedoms to travel safely throughout the county. As you all know, we're also in an urgent state of climate crisis, and it is affected by inefficient transit. So we need to bring our city on par with all the other cities. We need to uphold the will of the voters, and we need to finally have effective and efficient transit on par with other major cities of this country. So thank you for your time, and be safe.
Charlotte Greenberg.
I'm here, Charlotte Greenberg. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you. I'm Charlotte Greenberg. It's B-A-R-G. I live in far north Hillsborough. I was going to say that nothing has changed since your last vote, but that's not correct. It's gotten worse. I have spoken to I don't know how many small business owners who couldn't pay their rent, whose landlords refused to allow them any laxity at all, who have just closed up shop. You are heading, in this county, we are heading for a humongous major recession, because the small businesses, which are the backbone of who we are as a country, are going to be gone. And many of them are not going to be coming back because they cannot afford to hold out. The people who have lost their jobs, the unemployment rate has skyrocketed. The will of the voters in 2018 is not the same as the will of the voters in 2020. In 2018, we did not have a pandemic. We had a whole set of different circumstances. In 2020, we have a pandemic with humongous high unemployment, with people who are losing their businesses, with people who are losing their jobs, have no idea when it's going to come back. To even talk about instituting a tax, whether you call it a new tax or an old tax, really is semantics. The point is, it's a sales tax and the highest in the state, make us the highest in the state. This is not the time to do it. I'm urging you to keep to your values that you had last time. Nothing has changed except that it's gotten worse. The original tax vote was taken in a totally different time, which is eons ago in terms of economics. Please do not vote to rescind your previous action. Thank you.
Leslie Mattern. Leslie Matterton. Sean O'Brien. Sean O'Brien. Lisa Ramos. Lisa Ramos. Sean Bukatis.
I'm here.
Sean, you there?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, sir. You're recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to speak real quick to the last portion, which is regardless of a pandemic, we still have children that go to school. They're going to go to school with or without jobs. So safety is very important. But to begin with, good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Yaskaitis. I've lived here in Tampa for about 15 years. I'm here on item F2. I'm very active in the community, and I play an active leadership role in many groups. I work closely with the City of Tampa and our City Council. I'm on the board of Historic Hyde Park. I'm here to ask for your support to rescind your vote for All for Transportation and move forward immediately with a public hearing on May the 4th. We need to protect what your voters, our neighbors have voted for. Just days after your last emergency meeting, our community watched as our friends and neighbors' lives were ripped apart. Several people were killed on our roads because the inaction that was taken, because All for Transportation funds have been locked up due to bad politics and greed. Let's be very clear. Transportation and pedestrian safety crisis is real, and it's not pausing for COVID-19 nor anything else. We continue to rank as one of the most dangerous areas in the country. It's not going away if we don't focus our energy and our money toward it. We as parents currently worry about our children as they walk or bike to school. We worry about our spouses as they go out to exercise, whether on foot or on bike. That's not any way to live. Yes, this pandemic is definitely shaking us to the core, but it too will pass, and we need to continue to work together to change our future here in the City of Tampa and Hillsborough County. This is ridiculous. We need to change it. We're only having this conversation due to bad politics and greed here in Hillsborough County. Other counties have already voted for this. 4 of them, in fact, have passed transportation surtax, and we are the only one with this problem. It's an embarrassment, something we shouldn't be proud of at all. Please remember the tax is already being gathered. The city and the county have already spent millions of dollars on transportation studies that have been approved and owed to the people, to your voters. These funds will help create jobs, and the jobs are very important, especially now. We also know that the gas tax will not be enough, and any federal stimulus investments will only go to metropolitan areas that have a match, and we won't have that if we do not move forward immediately. The citizens and voters have made up their minds, and we need to move forward and respect that. Thank you.
Christopher Gleason. Christopher Gleason.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sir. You recognize.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Christopher Gleason. I'm going to support moving forward with a replacement transportation tax referendum. If the Supreme Court does decide to throw out our existing tax that was approved by 57% of the voters in 2018, this meeting will give all you a chance to vote yes on agenda item F2 and moving along that required process to see the replacement transportation tax on the ballot in 2020. A no vote leaves you and the voters flat-footed in addressing the much-needed transportation infrastructure improvements the county needs moving into the future. It would be bad governance for any of you to let that happen. It's service to the residents of this county. We are already behind similarly sized counties in providing viable transportation options outside of single occupant vehicles. It cannot wait any longer to see the funding increases in this area. Also, safety for pedestrians and biking is of utmost importance to improve the dire numbers of fatalities and serious injuries resulting from interaction with motor vehicles. In 2018, the voters of this county passed 1% transportation surtax. It has been collected from residents and visitors for the last 15 plus months. If the Florida Supreme Court throws out the already voted on 1% surtax on appeal, we cannot wait any longer to start to address the funding shortfalls in our transportation and transit network. Sorry. Hold on one second. In February, this measure passed 6-1, and then on April 1st, with little notice or public input, it was struck down 4-3. The only thing that changed is our current pandemic and the optics of taxation in the economic downturn. This is not a new tax. Agenda item F2 only leaves our options open in the future to a replacement transportation surtax referendum on the ballot in 2020. Thank you.
James Shirk.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm Jim Shirk. I live in District 3. I'm a proud resident, and I just want to emphasize how important transit funding is going to be when all these people are losing their cars. How many people are going to have their cars repossessed? How many people are not going to buy a car because they don't have an income stream? How many people will lose their cars because they can't pay for insurance? And how many people will be stuck with either having to walk or take a bus? And what do they do if there's no bus? We cannot recover as an economy if people can't get to work, to shopping, and to their doctor. We can't survive if we can't move around. And unfortunately, this virus is going to wreck the economy, and we need to be able to rebound when we get some relief from lockdown. We're not going to be able to rebound if there's no alternative to cars that we don't have. Just remember, it's not just a safety issue, it's an economic issue. And the tax has already been collected. It hasn't really hurt my small business. As some of you know, I have a small business. Anyway, please reconsider your most recent vote, the April 1 event, and give us a chance to get around with public support. Thank you. And that's my comments.
Robert Miley. Robert Miley. Linda Hughes.
This is Linda Hughes. Good morning, commissioners. I'm speaking on item F2. I'm asking the board to rescind their vote of April 1 on the transportation surtax referendum and to reschedule the public hearing. In 2018, 57% of Hillsborough County voters approved a referendum to tax themselves directly to provide better transportation. That's a strong vote for better transit that may shortly be denied by the state Supreme Court on a technicality. We need a plan B to make sure the surtax happens and that voters get what they asked for. With the coming recession and loss of tax base, we will need this transportation funding source even more. Having better transportation and transit that provides jobs and connects workers to jobs will be essential to Tampa's economic recovery. Also, the surtax will provide matching funds for federal monies that would not be available otherwise. We need to use all possible sources of funds to make our transportation system more robust to support Tampa workers and businesses. I read in the Tampa Bay Times today that some commissioners are reluctant to move forward with an additional tax during the coronavirus pandemic when so many people are out of work or worrying about their financial future. This is understandable, but scheduling the public hearing does not commit to the tax. It only moves us in that direction and allows us time to review the issue. It would give voters a forum to air their current views on the transportation system that they asked for and were willing to pay for. So please vote to reschedule the transportation surtax public hearing for May 4th and keep our options open on this important issue. Thank you.
Sam Gibbons. Sam Gibbons. Barbara Topic.
My name is Barbara Tepke. On November 2018, 57% of our citizens voted yes on the transit tax. On April 1st, 57% of our commissioners voted no on a replacement referendum. Today, you have a chance to change that vote to yes and protect transit funding in our county. Thank you.
Justin Reich. Justin Rick or Justin Reich. Nina Tatlock.
Hello, this is Nina Tatlock. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Nina Tatlock. I'm speaking on agenda item F2. As a voter in District 1, I voted for this, knew what they were voting for, and it passed with high numbers. Please vote yes on agenda item F2. And thank you for your time.
Kathy Bailey.
Kathy, unmute.
Yes,
Hello?
it's Kathy Bailey. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You're recognized.
Hi, I'm a concerned citizen, a member of Sierra. I spent about 15 years in public health in very needy neighborhoods, and transportation was a major problem. And I would like to say in regards to item F2 that truly our option ability to food, work, health care is very important to these people. They have a very hard time, and that we should keep preserving the replacement referendum. It's a no-risk option that costs nothing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. C.L. Townsend. C.L. Townsend. Russell Meyer.
Good morning, Chairman Miller and commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to shout out to the technical staff that's making this possible. They're doing an excellent job. I'm the pastor, one of the pastors of the Lutheran Urban Parish of Tampa. We're in Seminole Heights and in North Tampa. Outside the front doors of St. Paul Lutheran Church, underneath Central Avenue, are streetcar tracks. In the 40s and 50s, the Tampa Bay area had one of the state-of-the-art streetcar systems in the world. The automobile industry bought that out, covered it up, and paved our roads. We've been paying for highways even if we don't own a car and can't afford it. It's time for us to spend public dollars providing transit that everybody can enjoy. I live in Tampa Palms. I'm not able to take public transit on a regular basis to go about my business in the parish. The people who live in Seminole Heights and North Tampa can't rely on public transit to go east and west across the county. If we want to be a 21st century city, we should do this, and we should do it as quickly as we can. I've been following the coronavirus response, and the thing that I'm seeing is an outpouring of love and support across the community. So many people stepping up to the plate. We need to honor the democracy that's going to create the future after the pandemic has passed. And that means giving people as much of an opportunity to express their collective will together. I thank you for your leadership. Please be well, stay safe, keep faith, and give love.
Philip Compton. Philip Compton.
Good morning. I'm Phil Compton with Sierra Club's Florida Healthy Air Campaign. I've lived in the county for the past 44 years, speaking today on item F2. You know, at a time when everyone's ability to breathe is of utmost importance, you need to know that Hillsborough County has Florida's unhealthiest air, and it's really because of our transportation system. Transportation is our biggest source of carbon emissions that threaten our future, as well as pollutants like nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds. And these particular pollutants turn into smog or ground-level ozone when Florida sunshine converts them as the day goes on. That's why we have more days every year with kids with asthma shouldn't be outside playing after school, more days than any other Florida county when people with COPD shouldn't venture out for a walk. And that's why the American Lung Association gives Hillsborough County an F every year for having Florida's unhealthiest air. Now, what's that got to do with the penny sales tax? Every penny would be spent on improvements that help reduce smog by making traffic run more efficiently, safer streets for cyclists and pedestrians, and a lot of our pennies would go for ramping up our transit system. HART has 1/3 to 1/2 the funds that all other transit systems and counties our size operate on outside of Florida. HART would use its pennies to buy more buses and hire more drivers so it could finally serve the public the way it has always wanted to, with buses that run everywhere, early, late, and often. These new buses could be zero-emission electric buses, the kind that all the big transit agencies like New York, LA, Chicago, and even Tallahassee are switching to now as they move to 100% electric fleets. Our pennies are the only thing that can ever make our air healthy enough so that people with asthma and COPD can stay healthy and not be as vulnerable as they all are today to the coronavirus and other respiratory diseases. Spending our pennies on transportation is really the best thing we can do to protect our public health. It's always been a good idea. Now it's critical for everyone's health and for the health of our economy as we recover from this challenging period. Please move forward today to a November ballot referendum to maintain our current penny sales tax for transportation improvements. Thank you.
John Ovink, O-V-I-N-K.
Good morning, John Ovink. Hello?
Yes, sir, you recognize.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
can you hear me?
Thank you. I can hear you. I am speaking in favor of the transportation surtax item F2. I'm a registered voter. I'm also an educated registered voter who has not missed an election since I was eligible to vote at age 18. I am now 66. I voted for the transportation surtax as did 57% of the population. I've lived in Tampa since 1994. I am now retired. I used to drive to work because there has never been a public transportation system in this county to speak of. And it's too dangerous and was practically impossible for me to go by bicycle. And so I admit I'm part of the traffic problem, which is congestion. Tampa and Hillsborough County lose millions of dollars per year while workers sit in traffic. Now let's not speak of the pollution it causes. If the current crisis has made anything clear, it's that we need to improve our public transportation system and keep the roads empty. I am also one of those voters who knows very well what he's voting for. I do not believe in my representatives second-guessing my intelligence. I am fairly sure that when 57% of the voters decided they wanted to start paying out more money for something, they know what they're doing. I, for one, do not like to spend more money than I have to, but public transportation to me is one of those have-tos, as I'm sure it is for the 50% who voted for the surtax. I'm also an attorney. As attorney, I know that the challenge in court is to convince a judge that you are the side who is right. Most laws can be interpreted in more ways than one, depending on your arguments. And so, and this may come as a surprise, many decisions come down to being morally and ethically right, or to the better attorney. Sometimes both, but not always. And here, although I believe in the voter referendum that can easily be interpreted to mean that the surtax stands, and I hope the Supreme Court agrees with me, the morally and ethically right thing to do as county commissioners is to pass a surtax ordinance that abides by both. By both the court ruling as well as the will of the majority of the population of Hillsborough County. I'm speaking here today because even if the court says the surtax cannot legally be voted in through a referendum, the morally right thing to do is to try to get it done anyway. Keep our options open. And so I'm asking you to do the right thing. Rescind your vote taken at the April 1st, 2020 meeting and set a public hearing on transportation surtax ordinance for May 4th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.
Our last speaker for the morning is Adam Metz. Adam Metz. Topher Morrison. Topher Morrison. Anastasia Bryant. Anastasia Bryant. Nikki Rice.
Good morning, commissioners and staff. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As I'm sitting here listening and counting down and writing down every single speaker from the beginning all the way through, sometimes people who've not always been on the same page, I think it's very clear at this point where the public stands and where the business community stands. I've remained on the line versus hanging up because I believe in all the same things that have been said by every speaker minus one. Obviously, to rescind the vote taken by the board on April 1st at your meeting, set a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance for May 4th at 6 p.m. and to ensure that the project that as a CAC MPO member that the IOC has received, which are wonderful projects, go forward. This isn't just about heart and about expanding transit. It's about building better communities, creating sidewalks and safety, fixing our arterial roadways, making sure we have signal priority. These are all things that benefit everyone. When you actually speak to the voters and they say, well, I'm not going to take a bus or I'm not going to get on a transit, I'm like, okay, well, how do you feel about the intersection that you can't get through? How do you feel about the way that traffic's flowing through your communities? Communities put projects on the table that are sitting at the IOC right now that incredibly, vastly improve our community. And earlier I heard somebody speak against this and say that small business owners can't be burdened. Well, let me be clear with you. The fact that we have to be on the phone today for hours because of this decision that I understand was probably made under duress. I am a hairdresser who is a booth renter, who is self-employed. I do not qualify and have been rejected for all forms of, quote, grants or SBA loans, and am incapable of getting actual unemployment. These are the issues I would like to be discussing today. And the last thing on my mind right now as I sit here with no money coming in my home to pay my mortgage or still pay rent on a building for a salon I cannot operate is the 1 cent tax that was agreed to by this community. What I should be doing right now is going to the library to get a packet to attempt to get some form of unemployment. And yet here we are, yet again, having to beg you to do what you need to do. And I pray and hope that you stand by the will of the voters here today and possibly just make a motion so we can stop discussing this as it's clear where the public stands and move on to more pressing matters that need to be handled by this commission that I know and have faith that you can handle today. Thank you so much.
That was our last speaker for the morning. We will resume public comment at the end of our meeting.
Good morning, Commissioner. I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller. It's Terry McElroy, Director of Communications.
Yes.
We had 3 speakers that had technical problems. There were Sam Gibbons, Gwen Myers, and Vivian. I don't see Vivian's last name, but we're trying to reach them. Can they speak at the end of the session in public comments? Because apparently there's some kind of technical issue with their connection.
Yes, if you just give me those names when we get back to the end of the meeting, we'll call on them.
Thank you, sir. We'll get those names emailed to you.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve this consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Miller.
Second.
Second by Commissioner White. The discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Miller,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp? Merman?
Yeah, yes.
Overman?
Yes, and Patricia Kemp actually motioned yes.
Thank you. Smith?
Yes.
And White?
Yes.
If Kemp did vote yes, the motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Mr. Merrill.
Yes, Commissioners, that takes you to your first time certain 10 a.m., which is Commissioner Smith's item concerning the surtax vote.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm bringing this back to you because when this was voted on April 1st, it was a special meeting. We had serious technical difficulties that compromised public comment. As you know, many people signed up to speak. Very few of them did get to speak. And this is an issue that the public deserves to be heard on, since it was an issue that the voters just passed in a landslide. And moreover, the public was surprised by our vote 2 weeks ago. I was surprised. Everyone expected us to follow through with what we had said we were going to do on March 4, when we voted 6-1 to prepare a backup replacement transportation referendum. So I felt the right thing to do was to let the public weigh in on this before we take a final vote today. And they have weighed in, and with lots of email, pro and con. But I have to point out that we have gotten many messages asking us to stick to our plan for a backup referendum. And they're coming from throughout the whole county, from Lutz to Ruskin. And we have letters of support from several community leaders and several business and civic organizations, including the Tampa Bay Chamber, the Tampa Bay Partnership, the League of Women Voters, West Shore Alliance, Downtown Partnership, the Tampa Bay Sierra Club, and groups like the Sidewalk Stompers, who are concerned about safe routes to school for their children. So I understand that people are hurting financially right now, just like our last caller, and things are changing day by day. Some things do need immediate action, but other things may benefit from taking some time where we have the time for more careful consideration as we learn more about our local economic situation, as things develop, and we really understand the balance of this tax and the need for transit. So setting a public hearing is just the next step necessary to keep our options open so we can have a new referendum ready if the courts strike down the referendum that was already approved by the voters. And if we decide later this year that the time is not right, the economy is not right, the public will is not there to place this on the ballot in November 2020, we have the option to pull it back. And frankly, I'm not promising that I'm not going to want to pull it back come August. I'm just asking you to keep our options open. Come August, we may decide we need this more than ever to help create jobs and ensure that our vulnerable workers have transportation available so they have a reliable means to get back to work. So board members, I'm asking you to consider giving this a little more time and keeping our options open for just a few months longer. And I'll close with asking you to consider Congresswoman Castor's letter, Kathy Castor's letter, urging us to keep this funding stream available so we will be in the best position to pull down federal funds in the coming stimulus package. The reason our community won hundreds of millions from the last Recovery Act of 2010 is because we had funding sources available for matching when other communities did not, and they missed out. And that's how we got $105 million from the last Recovery Act to build the Crosstown Connector. So my motion is to, pursuant to Rule 11 of the board's Rules of Order, to rescind the vote of the board taken at the April 1, 2020 meeting
and set a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance for May 4th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the same manner as was done by this county commission by a 6-1 vote on March 4th, 2020, with the same a draft referendum that we adopted at that time.
Second.
Commissioner Overman seconds.
There's a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp. Commissioner Overman to the motion. You recognize.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by saying any opposing comments that I've seen so far are unfortunately of the impression that this is establishing a secondary tax on top of the tax that we're already currently paying that was voted in on 2018. This is not a new tax. We're going through the steps of preserving the tax that our citizens voted on in 2018 and overwhelmingly approved. The vote is simply to set a public hearing for May 4th, 2020. We are duty bound to preserve the sales tax that citizens of Hillsborough County voted on. Not doing so would betray the voters who, in their true spirit of self-governance, decided they wanted to improve the quality of life by casting their vote for a sales tax. Taking this first step in placing a referendum on November 2020 ballot is a backstop measure should the Supreme Court rule negatively and by basically disrespecting the will of the voters. Major deficiencies in our transportation infrastructure still exist as they did in 2018 when the surtax was overwhelmingly approved. If we sit by and allow the will of the voters to be negated by the Supreme Court, and we do not have this referendum, deficiencies will continue to mount. Due to expenses incurred due to this pandemic, the county finances will be strained. Making transportation improvements, safe roadways, sidewalks, road maintenance, and other needed infrastructures will be delayed for years. If this goes forward, we need to have a strong communications plan to ensure voters know this is not a new tax and is merely a backup plan to preserve the will of the voters of 2018. The inequities in reports we've seen in the 2020 Regional Competitiveness Report, which found that transit would improve the income inequality gap, reducing the poverty rate, and improve economic mobility, which will be direly needed as we recover from this pandemic. Real Choices When Not Driving report noted that an astounding 7.1% of Hillsborough County residents, nearly 100,000 people, do not have a vehicle, and that transit, trails, and safe pedestrian networks provide real transportation options for these residents to access jobs, school, healthcare services, and grocery stores. The coronavirus has magnified the inequities that exist in our community. For close to a month, staff has worked around the clock to find solutions for carless citizens to provide COVID-19 testing. There are still pockets where people without cars struggle to find food. From one of our school districts, 147 food distribution sites. Imagine the difficulties of picking up groceries or going to their essential jobs in the future if we should ever face a disaster like this again. Emails and phone calls from citizens complain about the curfew in closed parks because they don't feel safe running, biking, or walking in communities that have dangerous roads or no sidewalks. These citizens need our help now more than ever before. Remember the last recession, how heart ridership exploded? People left their cars at home to save money on gas. Some who had multiple vehicles in a household went down to one to save on insurance costs and maintenance costs. I expect the same scenario to play out again as we enter into a possibly even deeper economic downturn than we did then. The other thing to consider is this surtax is a local jobs bill. It is truly our only option to create significant amount of jobs when we will need it the most. We have a strong array of support from people, groups. This surtax is supported by Democrats and Republicans, business membership organizations, and transit advocates. The common thread is this surtax is an essential component of the county's continued economic development efforts. And those beliefs we held true before we had substantial job losses we're experiencing now. Without the surtax, this county will lose and lose big time. After the initial push for aid and relief, the federal government and state governments will transition to packages to stimulate the economy. As stated by Congresswoman Castor, any lack of local transportation funds will be devastating to Hillsborough County's ability to recover from a recession, to be able to draw down funds for major transportation and infrastructure projects, and boost wages and jobs. Other Florida counties have a surtax and will win the race for federal and state infrastructure money, including the money for the CARES Act and others, while they've relaxed the matching to 20% instead of the 50% for COVID-related transportation infrastructure projects. We will still not qualify for those dollars and will suffer the consequences in jobs as we try to recover. On more than one occasion, members of this board have noted that we lose money for transportation projects that could substantially help our communities because we don't have a united front. This vote today is an opportunity to give our jobless citizens a fighting chance to get back to work. FDOT 2 years ago launched a workforce training recruitment campaign because the skilled laborers needed by contractors to do transportation project is sorely needed. If we put our efforts and shoulder against that effort, we can create jobs in Hillsborough County like no tomorrow with these resources. Our moving forward with transportation projects will add to the needed and expand much needed training programs, which would be a win-win for residents needing jobs, receiving skilled training, and for employers who are in dire need of trades workers. As we heard all the letters of support earlier from our mayor, Mayor Lott, Mayor Castor, the Chamber, Economic Development Corporation, from our chamber and our communities, it is critically important that we move forward by setting this hearing. As I make a motion to, or as we have the motion ahead of us, and I will support the motion, I do have one question for Mr. Merrill. Without the surtax, which I know will dramatically hurt HART and limit or eliminate many of the projects in the queue for HART's projects going forward. But as far as Hillsborough County is concerned, without the surtax and our decreasing forecast for future revenues as a result of the pandemic, do you believe there's money in our budget to obtain federal transportation grants that require local matching funds at this time?
Mr. Merrill, you recognize.
Yeah, not without making other changes in our budget. At this point, we wouldn't have sufficient funding to be able to provide matches.
So if I understand you correctly, previously we had to make some choices regarding fire rescue and the sheriff, even in with the surtax. Basically, we would be left without being able to take advantage of any federal transportation dollars and probably state dollars as well, given that they require a matching contribution. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say we wouldn't be able to take advantage of any federal dollars because, for example, we are going to be receiving, it's been confirmed, we're going to be receiving $256 million under the COVID Recovery Act from the federal government. And Congress is considering other infrastructure and recovery bills. There are federal grants available for transportation that don't require match money, but I think what you're referring to and maybe others are referring to are some of the larger grant programs under the federal government, which do require federal matches, in which you're trying to draw down large amounts of money that are required to build out big transit systems, for example. And so those type of grants without another funding source, at this point, we wouldn't be able to provide a match without making other significant reductions in the rest of our budget.
Thank you, sir. And to that effort, most of the COVID-19 related funding still needs to be related to COVID-19. And so while they are available to us, there are strings attached to utilize those monies. So much of our potential transportation projects will not qualify for those types of funding to some degree. There may be some things we can do, but it's still going to have some limitations there that would obviously not meet the needs of our citizens and may not create the jobs that we're critically going to need moving forward as we recover from this. Should we have a reduction in building, homes, other things, or a reduction in the real estate market, it's very possible that our ad valorem dollars might take a hit as well, as we saw in the previous recovery. So again, we'll find ourselves with lower levels of revenues to provide services to our citizens that is critically going to be needed in order to allow our citizens to not fall through the crack and find ourselves with even a greater level of unemployment and a lower level of economic competitiveness. I hope that we don't see that scenario. But without making sure that we preserve this surtax, I fear that we will find ourselves cutting our nose off to spite our face. And with that, I'll yield.
Okay, I see no other hands in the queue to speak at this particular point in time. Commissioner Kemp, you recognized. Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Okay, I'm on there here. You can hear me? Thank you. Thank you. I want to just recognize all those who spoke this morning. That was an amazing show of support in this community. And I mean, it is, they gave like 1,000 reasons, which I won't repeat here, but I thought it was an amazing chorus there in support of moving forward and allowing us to vote on this today, move it forward for the next meeting, and then we can get the OPAGA study and we can evaluate. This is not a time for us to be cutting off our options for the future. We can look at where we sit in August, and I think it's really even more important right now that we do this move. I want to thank Commissioner Smith for bringing this back. And Commissioner Overman, I appreciate all the comments you made. We've heard from the very long list of organizations for support, business and otherwise in this community for doing this. We have a long list, I know, from being a commissioner here for 3.5 years, of road and intersection improvement and arterial road improvements and everything else, smart lighting. We cannot do this and have not been able to do it in the last 3.5 years in a supercharged economy. We have not been able to do this for years and years. We have no funds for those roads unless we have this funding. 60% of it going to road and intersection and other improvements. We know that we have some of the most dangerous roads in the nation. We have school safety, it's all the time begging to improve. We talked, or we have passed for a 2-mile zone around all our schools to make sure that kids can get to school safely with sidewalks, with crossing, with everything else they need to get to school. We are already collecting the tax. It's already being taken. And as a few speakers said, it's not something that's really on their mind about where they're moving forward. But this is this will be so important to our economy, especially in these times of coronavirus. As was pointed out, and as Congresswoman Kathy Castor's letter states, we need to be teed up to match some of that federal funding. Of course, some of it we'll get, but much of it we will not bring down to this area for this economy unless we move forward with this and show our local commitment. And I will say that we have transit workers out there that are, in my mind, first responders. There are now, and there will be hundreds of thousands of people depending on transit. We have our transit workers that are, not only is our transit system one of the most underfunded transit systems in the nation by a long shot, which is one of the reasons we can't do the kind of service that we should be doing. But our transportation, our transit workers, our bus drivers are some of the most underpaid in the nation. And here they are doing the hard work that they're doing during these times. And we have to, it's important that we are also looking at them and thinking about them during this time and what will happen if we cannot move forward with this injection into our economy. So a lot has been said, and I want the opportunity to move this forward. We can get that OPAGA study. And thank you so much for everyone for speaking and doing such a great job. Points that were made are so important. We need to move forward. And with that, I'll yield.
We have a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp. Seeing no further hands, please call the roll.
Miller?
No.
Hagan?
No.
Kemp?
Yes.
No.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
No.
Motion failed 3-4. Commissioners Miller, Hagan, Merman, and White voted no.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes, Commissioners, if we want to waive the rules, we have a 10:30 time certain, which is a special appearance by John Flanagan of Career Source.
Move to waive the rules.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Merman to waive the rules to take up our time certain at 10:30. Hearing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Merrill. Mr. Merrill? Okay, we lost Mr. Merrill.
No, I'm here. I guess I was just expecting Mr. Flanagan to just start. There's no introduction here. It's his special appearance, and so if he's there, he can just begin.
Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Board of County Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Good morning. My name is John Flanagan, Chief Executive Officer with Career Source Tampa Bay. Would like to update the commission on some of the issues related to our unemployment compensation system and how that's managed through Career Source Tampa Bay. You do have a couple of an infographic there that talks about unemployment claims and daily job postings, just to give an idea of what job seekers are experiencing right now and what unemployment compensation claimants are experiencing right now. As it relates to the state of Florida, 552,000 new claims have been filed in the last 3 weeks. Hillsborough County represents about 6.9% of that, or approximately 38,125 new claims have been approved through the Connect system. So that represents about a threefold increase in unemployment claims prior to 3 weeks ago, before the effects of COVID-19 took place. So typically what a UC claimant would have to do is register in the state system of record for job search, which is Employ Florida, which is the system that all career sources across the state and Career Source Tampa Bay uses to either engage or manage their customer base. The governor has waived the work search requirement, the waiting week, up through May 2nd of 2020. So as it relates to our internal traffic, we have received we have received 14,822 new registrants on Employ Florida to engage in job search activities. Again, the two used to be a requirement. Now it is waived until at least May 2nd. So some of the things that the state of Florida has done to update the Connect process is they've added an additional 80 servers to the Connect system to increase traffic capacity. This allows for up to 120,000 claimants to file simultaneous claims, which used to handle about 20,000 claimants at a time, which is really why you saw that initial significant backlog. There still is a backlog and they're working through it, but traffic appears to be loosening up in the, for the online claims. They've also allowed paper applications for claimants, which are available at all 5 of our Career Source locations, in addition to 5 FedEx office locations throughout Hillsborough County. So claimants have a minimum of 10 locations that they can go and fill out a paper application and send it into Tallahassee. And if you go to a FedEx location, you can fill it out, drop it off, and they will send it for you. They've also increased call center staff capacity to more than 1,000 representatives through additional procurement of 2 firms that are already online and fielding calls. So essentially, last week they had, the first week they had about 800,000 calls, and they were only able to successfully field about 1% or 8,000 of those. So they understood very quickly that they had to get some assistance up and ready as soon as possible. They've done that. There is still a backlog of calls, but I do believe it is working its way through. They've also allowed local boards to have individuals trained for frequent call subjects, most notably PIN resets in the UC or the Connect system. Now that incorporates about 40% of all calls that they receive. So they've allowed folks, they've allowed all 24 local boards to help assist with that. So some of the things that Career Source Tampa Bay is doing in assisting DEO, we're doing this in the following ways. We trained 6 staff to assist with PIN resets to the Connect system. We have also expanded our call center hours, opening 2 shifts for extended weekday and Saturday hours. And again, as stated before, we have paper applications ready at least 10 locations within Hillsborough County. Now, I do want to make a point that Career Source Tampa Bay is not the Department of Economic Opportunity. We are simply doing our very best to assist the customers of Hillsborough County who are having difficulty with the Connect system. So typically what we do is try to put people into employment. Right now, what we're doing is we're utilizing every available resource to make sure that our claimants have access to the system more rapidly than they would have had before. So I don't know, Mr. Merrill, if I need to pause and take time for some questions from the Board of County Commissioners, if that's appropriate or not.
Yes, that would be the time to do that, John. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Mr. Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, I just want to thank you and your staff. Honestly, I don't even think you've slept in 3 weeks. You have been doing your best to talk with everybody in the community that's tried to file a claim but was getting frustrated and exasperated because Tallahassee wasn't responding. But you got through it, and I think now with the mobile app, that has really helped a lot of the claimants. I'm kind of not in favor of the paper app. You and I have talked about that, and I think you kind of agreed. It takes too much time, and you don't know what pile it's going into once it gets to Tallahassee. So I think, and how long it would take to have it opened and scanned and all that. So I think, though, that your office and your staff have talked to as many people that have called my office to assist them in getting their claim filed. And everybody is extremely, extremely appreciative of what you have done, what your staff has done. I just want to give you a huge thank you and to your staff. for really doing whatever you needed to help these people, because we probably have, at the end of the day, I mean, I know we have 38,000, but if you factor in the backlog, I think you're talking more like 50, 60, could be some very, very high numbers. So you guys are doing great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will pass that on to the team as well. Thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
I see no other hands up right now. Ms. Flanagan, did you have anything else you need to bring forth?
Yeah, so one more quick item on the on E1, and that is really to to talk about the other side of this. And you'll see on your graphic that was given, it's not just an increase in claims. And Commissioner Merman is absolutely correct. Those are 38,000 and approximately 38,000 claims that have actually been filed. Folks that are currently unemployed and have not had the ability to file a claim yet, those aren't counted yet. So we'll continue to see some of that flow in. The other dichotomy to this is we have seen a decrease in job postings of about 30% over the last month if you compare 2020 to 2019. The biggest industries, the industries most significantly impacted, obviously, are hospitality, tourism, and retail, where you've seen almost a 60% reduction in job postings, and that's a little bit of a lag. We'll start to see those. My assumption is start to see those drop even more as the days goes on until we get through this. And then transportation and logistics has seen about a 44.5% decrease in job postings. Now, to be clear, job postings are down across all industries. These two simply just kind of lead the pack in regards to that. So these are kind of the first wave of our workforce that's being affected through the essential shutdown of COVID-19 to the economy. So I will leave a couple of minutes for questions if that is appropriate, Mr. Merrill, for the Board of County Commissioners. If not, I can move on to agenda item B1.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up at this point in time, Ms. Flanagan. So, Mr. Merrill, we'll move on to B1.
B2.
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 Sir.
I apologize. B2.
Okay, Mr. Merrill.
Yes, this is the commissioners. This is the item that was originally brought forward in order for the board to approve the career source for your workforce plan. And so I'll just ask Ms. Flanagan to give a brief summary of that and then take questions, and then you can go ahead and vote on it.
Ms. Flanagan, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Merrill. Thank you, Board of County Commissioners. Agenda item B2 is covering the Title I. Title I of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act requires each local workforce develop and deliver to the state a comprehensive four-year plan to be submitted in partnership with the chief elected official, which is why it is before you today. Regulations require that states and local workforce development boards to regularly revisit and recalibrate state plan strategies in response to changing economic conditions and workforce needs of the state. The law does emphasize the importance of collaboration and transparency. Some of the things we've done in regards to what that is, we have with the Career Source Tampa Bay Board of Directors preliminarily approved the plan, which allowed us to move it out to public comment for a 30-day period that started on February 4th and closed on March 16th. We left it open a little bit longer. We also had a public session on February 27, 2020 for public input. There were no attendees present at this meeting. We had a partner meeting with all of our Career Source Tampa Bay partners and stakeholders on January 23rd for input into the plan as well. So what I want to talk about quickly, some of what the plan includes. In this plan that would be effective July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2024, includes our organizational structure, an analysis of need and available resources, local workforce development area vision and strategic goals, coordination of services, a description of our one-stop local system, and a description of our program services. Now, I also wanted to highlight for the benefit of the Board of County Commissioners, the substantive changes since the development of the 2016 to 2020 plan. So some of the key differences between this proposed plan and the last plan that was approved. First and foremost is the procurement of the one-stop operator and career services, business services, and WIOA adult and dislocated program services. Now, we still intend to do that, but I do want to make one thing clear. We were all set for procurement and transition on July 1 of 2020. That has since been delayed due to the COVID-19 virus, and that was delayed because it would have been difficult, practically impossible for a new vendor to come in and onboard approximately 70 team members. So the CareerSource Tampa Bay board voted to cancel and reprocure at a later date. What that later date is, we wanted to make sure that we are past this issue so we can open up competitive procurement again, and we can get the right vendors in here to make sure that we're providing the services we need to provide. We've also revised our targeted industry sectors, one of those being transportation and trades, and certainly that kind of fits with the discussion prior to this. It's something that's going to be a significant need in Hillsborough County coming forward. So we certainly identified that as one of our key industry sectors. We've realigned business services, and we focused on new initiatives such as the Summer Jobs Program for Youth. Now certainly the realignment of business services and the procurement of the one-stop operator career services were done specifically in response to some of the issues that were unearthed by the U.S. Department of Labor in its audit back in 2018 of CareerSource Tampa Bay. Again, we are still moving through that, and these are done in cooperation. And quite frankly, from the board of directors of CareerSource Tampa Bay standpoint, this is the best way in which to conduct business in the region. So I do want to make a quick statement about, post COVID-19. Now, keep in mind, this plan was completed with all significant partner input and the ability for the public to comment prior to the known severity of the COVID-19 outbreak. Some strategic goals in this plan will correspond to issues related to operating in different, in a different reality post-crisis, such as the ability to deliver services in a virtual setting will have an added urgency to their implementation. We've already started to do that at CareerSource Tampa Bay for the ability for folks to reach out on a virtual, on a virtual platform and receive some of the training and resources that they would need. And we're also looking at the future of work by partnering with stakeholders in the private sector to ensure that we are training for jobs of the future, which may require a significant transitioning effort from entry-level and middle-skilled employees in industries that are likely to be adversely affected through the COVID-19 outbreak to industries that will have the ability to withstand additional interruptions to its workforce in the event of another outbreak or second wave of COVID-19. So we do certainly recognize that this plan wasn't created in a vacuum, and circumstances have significantly changed. One of the things that we do as a board is we certainly update and revise our plan at a minimum every 2 years, but we're certainly going to take a look at this plan and make sure that we are adding information and we're adding strategic directives in there that deal with the crisis at hand and how do we weather that in the future. Just wanted to be very clear about that. So again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Board. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
I see Commissioner Merman, your hand is up. You recognize?
I'll move approval of the plan. And I just want to thank John again for all his advice. I know he'll be prepared going forward once this pandemic hopefully resolves itself in our community and we're able to put people back to work.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Berman, second by Commissioner White. I see no further hands for discussion. Please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
I'm sorry. I had been, sorry. I've been down county center and I got knocked off for the entire discussion, so I don't feel as though I can vote.
Pardon me?
I am at county center and my connection went down for the entire discussion practically, so I'm not even sure what's being voted on.
Well, we're voting on item B2.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll say yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you for your time, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for your time.
Camaro.
Yes, Commissioners, that concludes your time certains. That takes us to our regular agenda, beginning with item B1, which is the request for approval of industrial development bonds for Baycare Health Systems. Bonnie Wise will introduce the item, and then Tom Morrison, who is the General Counsel to the Industrial Development Authority, will provide the details.
Okay, who's coming up now?
Bonnie?
Bonnie.
Wise, you recognize.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Bonnie Wise, Deputy County Administrator and Chief Financial Administrator. Before you today is a request to issue not to exceed $1.25 billion of Hillsborough County Industrial Development Authority bonds on behalf of Baycare Health System for projects to be located in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties. This transaction has been reviewed by County Economic Development staff as well as County Debt Management staff. In addition, a thorough analysis is performed by the county and IDA's financial advisor, and copies of that are included in your agenda package. As this item was originally scheduled for the board meeting on April 1, you may see reference to that particular date in the documents that you have attached. Before I turn this over to Tom Morrison, counsel to the IDA, I wanted to let you know that since the date of the IDA approval, the financial markets, including the bond markets, have been severely disrupted for borrowers such as Baycare, and various approvals needed for the tax-exempt bonds were delayed. So in order for Baycare to move forward and access their funds, they have issued approximately $600 million of corporate taxable bonds as a direct placement without needing to go through the IDA. And therefore, part of the plan of finance being approved today will not be needed by Baycare. However, the remaining issuance by the IDA would move forward subject to your approval today. We have various people available for any questions that you may have, including Janice Polo, who is Executive Vice President and CFO of Baycare Health System, and her counsel, John Stokes, Grace Dunlap with Bryant Miller Olive, Bond Counsel, and Marianne Edmonds and Molly Clark of Prague, the county's financial advisor. With that, I'll turn it over to Tom Morrison, counsel to the Hillsborough County Industrial Development Authority.
Mr. Morrison, you recognize.
Good morning, Mr. Miller and members of the board, Mr. Merrill and Bonnie. As Bonnie said, the original plan of finance for this bond issue included $500 million of new money for capital improvements in the various hospital facilities in the 3 counties, plus construction of a new hospital in Wesley Chapel. And as Bonnie stated, Baycare, due to the market fluctuations, elected to go forward with a $600 million new money taxable corporate bond issue, which eliminated the $500 million new money part of our bond issue, leaving us with a potential or an upset figure of $750 million for refunding of existing bonds. As we've explained to the board in the past, the IDA approves upset figures or not to exceed figure for bond issues, and the users very frequently issue less than the anticipated or the approved amount. So we're going to ask you to approve the plan of finance as presented to you, with the understanding that we will not issue the new money portion. We will issue up to $750 million of refunding bonds. At present, it's anticipated that we will go forward with these bonds were anticipated to be sold in a total of 7 separate series. We're going to go forward with less than that. And at present, it's anticipated that we'll go to market either in late April or early May with approximately $516 million, with the possibility to do some refundings a little bit later, depending on market conditions. So the only different thing about this bond issue, other than the big number that you haven't seen from us in the past, is the multi-county aspect of it. That's legal. It can be done. And we anticipate having interlocal agreements between IDA, Pinellas County, and Pasco County. One of those counties has already given approval this month. The other is expected to address the matter later this month, and we don't anticipate that they will not approve. So that being said, very complicated financing. I'm happy to answer questions, as will the rest of the team, as you may have. And of course, the IDA recommends it to you for approval. The IDA approved it by adopting a bond resolution on March 6th, which followed a public hearing that was held on March 2nd. So what we're asking you to approve is the plan of finance as presented to you.
Okay,
Move the item.
Hold on. Before we get a motion, I see Mr. Harless's hand up. Mr. Harless, did you have something you had to say?
Yes, sir. Not to the motion, but I do need to ask Commissioner Kemp a question at the conclusion of this item, please.
Okay, all right. I heard a motion by Commissioner White. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Merman.
Motion by Commissioner White, second by Commissioner Merman. Commissioner Kemp, I see your hand. Commissioner Kemp? Okay. I see no further hands up at this point in time. Please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Hollis, you need to ask Commissioner Kemp a question.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Kemp, just for the sake of clarification, you did vote yes on the consent agenda. We did not get you on the recording. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Merrill.
Your next item, Commissioners, is B3. It's a management and budget item.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Kevin Brickey, Director of Management and Budget. B3 is asking for your approval by supermajority vote pursuant to board policy, an FY20 budget amendment to transfer $11.5 million from the Catastrophic Disaster Recovery Fund reserves and appropriate it in the Future Disaster Events Fund. This action is requested to fund the costs related to the COVID-19 health emergency, and it is anticipated that approximately 87.5% of allowable COVID-19 related incremental expenses will eventually be reimbursed by FEMA in the state of Florida. Thank you.
What's your pleasure?
Move approval.
Motion by Commissioner
Second.
Merman.
Seconded by Commissioner Kemp.
Second by Commissioner Kemp. I see no hands up at this particular point in time, so therefore, please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes, Commissioners. Your next item is the C1, which is the item I brought forward. The reason for bringing it forward is really to get back on our radar some outstanding discussions on various fees that have been discussed in past months. I'm not asking for any decision today, but would like some indication of how the board would like to move forward. There are 4 fee areas that we need to address over the next couple of months. The first one I actually forgot to include in the agenda description, but it is solid waste collection fees. So these would be the fees paid to the franchise haulers. Those franchise agreements expire in September. As you may recall, we did go out for bids earlier this year, got back some bids. The prices were quite high, and we elected to not move forward with those bids. However, the contracts are coming up in September, and so I just want to let you know that we will be working with the franchise haulers on contract extensions, and we'll bring those back to you probably the second meeting in May. The second fee area would be parks impact fees. There was a study undertaken, I believe it's completed, but because of current events, we weren't able to bring the study forward. I would say that probably in the whole scheme of things, park impact fees are not critical at the moment, but that's a policy issue for the board. But it is ready in case you want to address it. Well, you should address it either way, either to move forward or not move forward with the study. The third fee area would be water wastewater fees. And we've had a number of board workshops on this issue. There's really three components to the water wastewater item. One is the impact fees for water and sewer, the so-called AGRF, the accrued guaranteed revenue fee, which is a fee charged to new development, basically to pay for or to reimburse us for holding capacity in place for that new growth. And the third component would be monthly user fees, which would be the fees that those of us who live in the unincorporated area pay for monthly use of water and wastewater. This is a particularly critical one because, as we've described to you, the South County water plant is at a point where it needs to have its capacity expanded because of potential issues with pressure in the system. And low pressure in the system would have an impact on current customers, so we're not so much talking about future customers. And EPC, Environmental Protection Commission, has told us that they're concerned, and obviously we know that. We're trying to move forward to remedy it. So that's one that really does need to be addressed. We want to be sensitive to ratepayers in this environment. We believe that we have a solution to get the South County plant expansion done without increasing, or at least only having very minimal increases in monthly user fees, as well as some increases in the impact fee and AGRF. So there is a board budget workshop scheduled for later this month, April 28th. And I would propose that we bring this item on water wastewater fees to that workshop, because it does have related implications to our overall budget. But that's where we are on that one. The final item would be mobility fees. Again, we've had a number of workshops. Staff has been working with the consultant to revise some of the construction cost estimates underlying the fee calculations. That's completed, and the study is updated, or being finally updated, and ready for the board's consideration. So I would suggest that we also address that at the April 28th budget workshop, since it does have connections back to our overall budget. And then, depending how the board wants to move forward, we can schedule a public hearing to get that implemented. So those are the four fee areas with proposed recommendations on how to handle them. And so again, not looking for action on any of the fees, but just an indication of whether the board's comfortable with that approach. So I'll finish just my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I have a question for Mr. Merrill. We still have a parks impact fee study to complete. Is that correct?
The study is complete, but we never had a chance to bring it to you because of the current environment, but it's ready.
If you bring the study to us, would the board have the ability to implement the fees at some given time in the future, early 2021, very late this year, something like that?
Sure. You can adjust the effective date any way that you'd like.
Okay. So my 2 cents worth is I'd like to see the parks impact fee study. I'd like to have the board take a look at it and at least reserve the right to get those started at the appropriate time as we begin to get this into the rearview mirror. I do not support any increases on consumers' monthly bills right now. So for me to support anything for the water treatment plant, the plan would have to involve 0 fee increase to citizens on their monthly bills, at least right now, at least for the foreseeable future. Mobility fees, though, are of such a high level of importance, in my opinion, that I think they should remain on the table. If the building industry, if developers are able to move forward with the development, that's a sign that that those fees can be paid by the end user. We all know that it's passed along to the end user, but using that to fund our road networks in particular would be, in my mind, of critical importance.
Okay.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the county administrator bringing this forward today. We are in unusual circumstances, and we were in the midst of setting workshops. So I appreciate having the opportunity to move forward on these conversations. We are in a difficult time period, but I do believe it's important now that we have some progress on these virtual meetings that we move forward with the business of operating our county well. The possibility of decreased revenue in the following years, it's critical that new structures pay their fair share for the future impact to our communities. If we do not, our current taxpayers will be left to pay for these shortfalls when there are many experiencing financial difficulties. Therefore, I move to have Mr. Merrill direct staff to set each of these issues for workshops so that we can get back on track and so we can get back on track and move as we move into the important budget season. So that's my motion, and then I just have a follow-up question.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Merman. Commissioner Overman, you had a question?
Just a question for Mr. Merrill. If there's been an update to the mobility fee study that takes into consideration no credit for the surtax, since it appears as though it's very possible we won't have one. I think that's important to make sure that our development community understands that the lack of surtax is going to increase their mobility fees, and we do need to make sure that we're covering our cost of expansion of our county, especially in areas where infrastructure is not in place. Thank you.
Yes, the study that has been updated does provide the fees both ways, with and without the surtax, and so you're correct. The fees will be higher without the surtax.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask a question.
Yes.
The thing I forgot to mention is because we're adding a number of topics appropriately to the April 28th budget workshop, I think we'll probably need to expand the time. It was originally set for 2 hours from 1:30 to 3:30, but these are important issues and we probably need to at least add another hour to that workshop. And so I would propose that as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. In some of our discussion, we lumped together all these fees, but in my mind, they're in 2 major categories. There's the rates that are paid by our residents for water and wastewater, and there's the impact fees that are paid by developers as they build to help pay their fair share of the infrastructure required by their building.
the residents, as we all know, are hurting financially, but the developers who are building, whether even if their market might be depressed for a little bit, but if they're building, they're making money. And so they're among the lucky people in our economy. And I think that's where we need to make sure they're paying their fair share, especially considering how low impact fees have been for so long. They've gotten a good deal in the past, so hopefully they took advantage of that. But now we are really going to have to look to making the development community pay their fair share as they build, and make sure that infrastructure keeps up. We have no other we're going to have precious little resources to even fill potholes in this county if that impact sales tax is struck down by the court. So we're going to need higher mobility fees, higher water impact fees, park impact fees, AGRF, all of that. If you're looking for direction, I agree with much of what Commissioner White said. All of this needs to be on the table and looked at for how we move forward with infrastructure. But I also agree that this is not the time to be raising rates on the residents per se.
Mr. Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll agree with the previous comments. Though we do I think making developers pay their fair share is important, but we have to also understand that that will increase the price of homes and may hurt affordable housing in the long term. But I think we can discuss all those in the workshop. Mr. Merrill, I really appreciate you bringing this forward. And I know in our discussion, I think you're taking a very surgical approach to this and looking for ways to kind of work these things through the situation that we're in our community with this coronavirus. So I do appreciate it, but I can't support raising any fees right now until we have a clear grasp on what the future for this virus in our community holds, because most health experts are projecting a return of the virus in the fall. So I'm glad to see that we're taking more of a surgical approach to it. Thank you.
Commissioner White, you recognize. Mr. White.
Commissioner Miller, that's from my previous question. I'll take the hand down. My apologies.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I'd just like to agree with the statement.
Lost her.
Commissioner Kemp.
I'm sorry. There we go. I don't know what. I just like to agree with the previous comments that Commissioner White made, that Commissioner Smith made, that Commissioner Overman made. I would be hugely, I am not interested in raising our customer rates. And I think we do need to look to the development fees to pay for the cost of this new development. So I want to look at all those. We might be careful about how we put them in. I know it was mentioned by Commissioner Merman about affordable housing, but I like to point out, as I have several times, there is an exception. There is in Florida statutes, it's abundantly clear when affordable housing meets the strict guidelines of that the legislature set out, that you can have impact fees. You don't have to put impact fees on those. So you can waive the impact fees, but for water and wastewater. So I think it's very important to note that, and we don't keep moving that forward because we do want to move into affordable housing, and there are waivers that can be done on all these different impact fees for affordable housing, but for water and wastewater. So, and again, I'm not interested in raising our customer rates. We did that for 2 years, but I think I would be loath to do that in these times. And so I look forward to further discussion. I think we have to really be thinking about how we move forward on this.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Merman. Seeing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Merrill.
That takes us to Commissioner items F3, Commissioner Miller's item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merrill. I originally put this on the agenda before the addendum came out to direct the county attorney's office to bring back an opinion to us whether land use meetings, zoning hearing master, and land use hearing officer public hearings could be conducted virtually and identify risk associated with holding virtually quasi-judicial land use proceedings. Since I put that on the agenda, Ms. Beck has rendered her opinion, and she has it with her today, and I think she's on the call. So, Ms. Beck, you're recognized to address this issue.
Yes, thank you, board members and Chairman Miller. I'll be brief. I'll just do a brief outline of what's in the memorandum that was provided to the board. We had been working closely with Development Services staff and trying to tackle the challenges of quasi-judicial proceedings, which is really something that's happening all around the state, and all the local governments are grappling with it, basically. In the memo, we explained the difference between a legislative action versus a quasi-judicial. Today's meeting would be an example of legislative actions as opposed to the different challenges that come with a quasi-judicial meeting. We also tried to break out the different issues with when you're holding a virtual meeting without a physical presence versus a virtual meeting with a physical presence. They each have some concerns which we point out, but with regard to the strictly virtual meeting, the three primary concerns that we were able to identify that come from compliance with our land development code and other fundamental due process issues have to do with evidentiary issues and how you go about submitting documentary evidence, maps and photographs and that sort of thing for the interested parties. And the second issue is the possible difficulties in becoming a party of record when there isn't a physical presence. And that really gets at the issue of certain citizens that may not have access to different types of communication, media, technology. And then lastly, the possible difficulties in creating a verbatim transcript. And the technology is improving all the time, as we have observed. So that is just something that is always kind of a risk when you're dealing in a virtual world. We also referenced some of the concerns that would apply to a virtual quasi-judicial hearing with a physical location. And those are largely based on the governor's order number 2091, sometimes referred to as the stay-at-home order. And that's because that order strongly encourages limiting the movement of individuals, particularly those over age 65 and those with underlying medical conditions, and the issues that would need to be addressed with those individuals trying to attend a quasi-judicial proceeding during these times. And lastly, we note that the Florida Supreme Court has issued an order that has suspended criminal and civil jury trials in the state through May 29th, as an example as well of what is a purely judicial matter where they have chosen to suspend those. The memo concludes with really just outlining the concerns that in terms of moving forward, our best advice is to suspend the quasi-judicial matters until, and we gave three options, either the state clarifies or gives us further guidance of how we can go forward, or until the executive order by the governor is suspended or rescinded, or until we're able to identify a process that would ensure due process for all parties. The administrative staff, as I understand it, has already suspended the quasi-judicial proceedings in May. I'm not sure of the exact date, but through some point in May. And so what we are happy to do is to revisit this and as we go forward and as we work our way through this declared state of emergency to see whether a comfort level can be reached going forward, either in late May or June. It is an evolving issue. So with that, I'll stop and be open to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Now, I've heard Ms. Beck say we've already suspended the council our May land use meeting. We won't have another one until June 9th, if I'm not mistaken. So we do have time, if depending on what happens out of the governor's office or anything else, to come back and revisit this particular issue at that time, because we have suspended our meeting in May. Am I correct, Ms. Beck?
Yeah, I probably would need staff to confirm that. That was an email I received, and that's how I understood it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Bowman, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. While I completely understand applicants' frustration with not being able to proceed, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and I believe it is best to defer to our county attorney's opinion, as well as the Florida Supreme Court, and the 13th Judicial Circuit, which have placed a stay on jury trials. What better source of guidance than our judges? I do feel strongly that we should mirror their decision. And while other counties may have creative ways of addressing this, I'd rather not we place the applicant, the public, or Hillsborough County in a precarious legal position by utilizing a method such as the one other counties have used, where the applicant waives their rights. I just don't feel comfortable with doing that, and it may cause problems down the road. We have enough difficulties operating efficiently now in the virtual world that I don't believe that it's right for our citizens nor the development community to move forward when we don't have the efficiencies we have as we do with in-person meetings. So I think it's important that we follow our county attorney's recommendation.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to adhere to the county attorney's recommendation. Ms. Beck, was there anything else you needed to say about this?
No, sir.
Okay.
I have my hand up. I have my hand.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. My mic's unmuted. Crew? Yes. Okay. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the county attorney's office. I thought they did an excellent job on the memo. As the only lawyer on the board, I read it. It's very clean, clear, direct. I think it was 100% on point as to due process. And the applicants aren't the only ones with due process. The citizens are also. And under Florida law, we require the public involvement. We have already said how difficult it is for citizens with our code as we have now. And, this would certainly put us in, I think, a bad legal place if we were to in any way disregard. But I'd just like to, again, thank you to the our county attorney's office for doing a very clear job of showing us what our options are. And we will continue, I think, to reevaluate, as you said, the situation as we move forward.
Mr. Hagan, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this is a question for Mr. Merrill. Quasi-judicial issues aside, is planning and growth still moving forward with non-quasi-judicial issues, your typical plats, development agreements, prop shares? Because I'm hearing some rumblings that there may be some current concerns that stuff's being shut down as well. Are we staying on top of that and moving forward accordingly, or how's that working?
As far as I know, we're still accepting plans and applications at the county center. There's an intake table there where we're taking them in, and our staff is still reviewing them. I don't know if either Lucia Garces or Adam Gormley are looped into the call. They could confirm that, but it's probably a little slower now because of circumstances, but we're open for business as far as I know.
I just want to make sure. I mean, I understand that we would assume things would move a little slower.
Lucia, did you have something to add?
I do. Commissioners, thank you. We are accepting applications, and we are continuing all the work that is administrative in nature. So, for example, building permits are moving. We accept them. We are conducting inspections. Our inspectors are conducting work sometimes with video, but they are going on. So anything that doesn't require an entitlement or board approval is continuing to move on. Site and subdivision applications are being accepted, but because some of them then require board approval, those would be the ones that get delayed because of the quasi-judicial component of it. So if it is already entitled and it is an administrative action, those are going through. If it is not, the applications are coming in. We're continuing to process them and queue them up for the quasi-judicial hearings once we open those up.
I see Mr. Gormley's hand up also. Mr. Gormley, you recognize?
Yes, sir. Just to confirm, Ms. Garces adequately covered that. Just to confirm, we are doing everything that we're able to do without required board action in terms of intake and processing applications.
Mr. Hagan, do you have anything else?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll deal with this as we move on. Okay. Mr. Merrill.
That takes you to your last commissioner item, F4, which is Commissioner Kemp's item.
Members, by rule, we have to have a waiving of the rules to even take this item up according to rules, and that requires 4 votes plus 1. We have to have a supermajority vote to waive the rules to bring this up. So,
move to waive the rules.
Pardon me?
Move to waive the rules, Mariella Smith.
As a motion by Commissioner Smith, is there a second?
Second. This is Commissioner Kemp.
Commissioner Kemp, you have to have a supermajority vote to waive the rules to bring this issue up. Please call the roll.
We didn't even say what the issue was.
Well, we got to talk. We got to waive the rules first and foremost, Ms. Kemp.
Does all the commission know what we're waiving the rules for?
We're waiving the rules for F3.
F4.
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 You must waive the rules first before you can bring it up.
Right. I was just going to state what I think it's important for everyone to know. We're just, this is we have to
waive the rules according to our rules. And it requires a supermajority vote. If we get the supermajority vote, then you can elaborate on what your issue is. Understand?
I do, but I think it would be good for the public even watching to understand that this is also an issue to do with the emergency curfew. And
you will have that opportunity when we if we waive the rules. Please call the roll.
Miller?
No.
Hagan?
No.
Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
No.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
requiring a supermajority vote, the motion failed 4-3. Commissioners Miller, Hagan, and Merman voted no.
Mr. Merrill.
That takes you to our last regular item, which is B1, which is a report from Social Services on our COVID-19 response to help citizens and businesses in need. I believe Audrey Ziegler is going to present this.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Audrey Ziegler, Hillsborough County Social Services Department. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to provide you with a little bit of comfort, a comfort level with the activities and the programs that we're putting in place in response to COVID-19. So we do have a new initiative. Due to the pandemic, newly unemployed residents are seeking crisis intervention services while pending the unemployment compensation benefit, which you heard about a little bit earlier today from CareerSource. This has doubled the request for services coming into the department. And in response to that increase for demand, we have been working with Mr. Merrill and asked for immediate access to additional funding to significantly increase capacity to assist impacted households. This will be accomplished in partnership with local nonprofits. Social Services is developing a program to augment existing programs to activate a quick response to residents in need due to the loss of wage as it relates to business closures for COVID-19. In addition, we are continuing our call center operations in the department, and we also plan to extend those activities to a separate line, which will be specific to address COVID-19 requests. Eligibility appointments continue and are being conducted virtually, utilizing relaxed eligibility criteria and a telephonic interview process, including waiving applicant signatures on our forms. Based on the abbreviated eligibility process and the increase in assistance requests, additional appointments have been added daily to expand our capability once again. The frequency of assistance rules, which did apply before, where a customer was only eligible one time per year, that requirement has been waived as of April 1st. So for example, if a household who had been assisted within the past 12 months previously was excluded from being assistance again, will now be able to apply again and be assisted. Households that have been impacted by the crisis with the loss of wage will be included in our vulnerable population prioritization so they have quick access to services. The department is also maintaining ongoing communication and collaboration with utility companies so that we're aware of who's being disconnected and when. We want to be made aware as soon as they plan on resuming disconnect orders for non-payment. We've also been in communication with them so that as they're identifying accounts that are being delinquent and added to the disconnect list, they're being referred to us immediately. We are still working or listening for messages from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office on the suspended services for evictions. And so we're watching that date closely so that we can address the spike in requests that will be coming in for assistance once those resume. That's all I have today. If there's any questions, I'm available.
Commissioner Overman, you're recognized. Thank you, Ms. Ziegler. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized. Commissioner Overman? Did we lose Commissioner Overman?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Let me say first off, of the group of folks working in this department, they are our heroes. They are our first responders to citizens' need, and I truly appreciate all the work that's being done by this department. Your report indicates that you expect the monthly calls assistance to exceed 5,200. That's an incredible amount of households that are desperately needing our assistance, and I applaud the work that you're doing. In response to this increase in demand, Social Services has requested immediate access to additional funding. Do we need a motion to approve that funding? And if so, I so move.
There's a motion by Commissioner Overman. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I thought we approved that. Well, it was the lump sum. I thought we approved that in that previous item.
Yeah, you don't really need to take an action today.
Hold up. Here from Mr. Merrill. Mr. Merrill?
No, you don't really need to take an action today. the funding is available. If we need to, we'll bring budget amendment forward, but I think we're good for now.
Commissioner Overman, would you withdraw your motion? Commissioner Overman?
But your motion of support would be helpful. I mean, so I'm not discouraging the vote. We don't have an actual budget amendment for you to approve today. So
all right, well, let's carry on through the motion. The motion by Commissioner Merman. I'm sorry, Commissioner Overman. It was second by Commissioner Merman. Commissioner Merman, I see your hand.
Yes. And this is really for Mr. Merrill. I know years ago, we approved to do social services for all the cities and the unincorporated. And I guess I just want to ask, as you're moving along and spending our money, can we keep track of what we're spending in the cities versus the county? Just so we can have a frame of reference. I just think it's really important. We don't get a lot of recognition for the services that Audrey and her team really do, and they are exemplary. I remember helping to bring Audrey onto the staff, and she has proved herself over and above 1,000 times. But I do think that and going through this emergency that we've had to go through, I've really seen, aside from some of our cities, that I don't know that the level of appreciation is there for what we do for all the residents in our county. So I guess that's just my request to you, Mr. Merrill, as you're spending the money in that area, that we just kind of keep track of it so we can know what we're spending and on whom.
Mr. Merrill?
no, absolutely, you're correct. A large portion of our funding does get spent to help citizens in all of our cities, and we do track that. So I'll get staff to send you out something in a memo form, and then we can bring something back at the next board meeting to give you more detail.
Right, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Merman. Seeing no further hands, please call the roll.
Miller?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Kemp?
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Merrill?
That just leaves one item remaining, which is the item A7 that was removed from consent for discussion by Commissioner Overman.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. This item, I pulled it really more for discussion. I pulled it to highlight our very concerning issues in South County. This item will help the situation, I feel, as we need more decisive action. Our South County facility expansion is 2 or 3 years away. Even if we decide on the future workshops to address our infrastructure in terms of water, the committed capacity of our facility currently falls short of the existing and permitted needs. Now more than ever, we need to assure citizens have potable water if this pandemic and dry season, which we've seen year to date at an extreme level, continues. We have to make sure the language is that new sod is permitted for watering daily on the first month and possibly every other day during the second month. This is putting a great deal of strain on our potable water. If we don't respond and act quickly, we will find ourselves with boil water notices and another health emergency in South County. I would much rather, during this dry spell, have new sod treated similarly to existing sod, which can only be watered twice a week. So I have a question, but more importantly, what I'd like to do is follow Sorry, I'm losing signal here. 1 second, please. Follow the county. Okay, 1 second. I lost myself.
Can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I can't.
Can you hear us? Okay. We got a
Okay,
problem.
I'm muted.
Got a problem with Commissioner Overman.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Commissioner Overman, this is Kevin Kerrigan, IO Director. It looks like you have, when you're unmuting, it's unmuting both your PC and your phone. So when both are unmuted, it's creating that echo effect. Okay. Are you able to mute the application and then unmute your phone? Is it allowing you to do that? Right now you're unmuted. I would keep we could try again because it looks like your internet connection is more stable now. You could unmute the software on your mic on your PC and mute your phone.
Is that better?
Yes, we're not hearing an echo now.
Okay, great, awesome. Okay, let me back up just a teeny bit. I would like to make sure that we are able to actually address the county attorney's draft notice to read broad enough in the legal ad to provide further limitations in the installation of sodded areas regarding irrigation hours and landscaping. And that's my primary motion.
So you're making a motion to approve item A7?
Yes, with language that's broad enough to include further restrictions as necessary to preserve the water source for citizens in specifically South County, but to preserve water for citizens at a safe level.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Overman to approve item A7, second by Commissioner Kemp. I believe that was Commissioner Kemp. Any further discussion? I see no hands at this point in time.
Oh, I have my hand up.
Commissioner Berman, yes, your hand is up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is, of course, something that Commissioner Smith and I are very knowledgeable on, the water, and especially the water usage in South County. That's why that new plant is so critically important. I'm not sure. Well, also, I just want to say Tampa Bay Water is doing so much in education to get people to get away from traditional landscaping and get more towards water conservation. So I do think a lot is being done in that area. But I heard something in her motion that said, do you want to limit people putting sod on their property? Was that part of your motion?
Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. I believe it would be beneficial to have enough flexibility in the language. Should that be necessary, we'd be able to implement something like that. The challenge we have is year to date, we have seen historically low year to date rainfalls and a very large demand of water usage. And frequently that has to do with new sod being installed in the multitude of homes that are being built in that area. So while if that is what's needed, then maybe we should make that recommendation. I'm not suggesting we do that right now, but I think we need to have enough flexibility in the language that if that is the need, that we're able to address it.
I guess I'd have to ask our county attorney because usually Swift Mud gets involved in the water restrictions and they put that forth. But are we actually able to limit people putting sod down in their yard because we're we haven't exactly proclaimed a water shortage crisis yet. And usually that's done through Swift Mud. But I guess I was just asking Christine if she knows, can we do that? I mean, can we go that far? I have never heard of any county doing that before, so I guess I just wanted to ask.
Commissioner Murmur, question. That was not part of her motion, okay?
Okay, but, okay, I thought I heard it in there, but okay, if it's not.
She was approving A7. She didn't put that in her motion.
But she did add language that said allowing for flexibility to go further if needed.
No, I asked her when she approved A7. She didn't say that was part of her motion. Am I correct, Commissioner Overman?
That is correct. That is correct.
She did not
So
put
you
that in
did
part of her
not, so she didn't add any language to A7?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
You still
I'm
want
good.
that question asked?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. I see no further hands. We have a motion by Commissioner Overman. I think it was second by Commissioner Kemp. Am I correct? Commissioner Smith, I'm sorry.
Smith.
Commissioner Smith. Okay. Please call the roll.
Miller,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Merman,
Yes.
Overman,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes, the only remaining items would be future discussion items and some remaining public comment.
Yep. We're gonna go to go to public comment first before we go to the future discussion items. We have some names that people called, they signed up and we weren't able to hear them. So I'm gonna go back through that list, starting with Sam Gibbons. Sam Gibbons on the line.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Miller.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. Sam Gibbons, Tampa. I'd like to thank those of you that continue to stand up for better transportation options and promoting economic stability. In these uncertain times, scheduling and following through with setting a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance, and this is in regards to F2, I apologize, would have been setting that public hearing for the transportation surtax ordinance would have been a breath of fresh air, knowing our elected officials are working to ensure a better future while aiding economic stability for our county. And while we're waiting for the Florida Supreme Court's answer to Commissioner White's inquiry regarding taxpayers' ability to tax themselves to pay for much needed multimodal transportation options, safety improvements across the county, I'd ask this body to revisit setting that public hearing for the transportation surtax ordinance. Our need for a backup plan is intergenerational, and I'm saddened to see that this hard work may crumble like our roads continue to because our local elected leaders fail to act. Again, as was the case, it seems, in 2016 with our Go Hillsborough initiative. If we had set a public hearing for that transportation surtax ordinance today, I think it would have sent a strong signal that Hillsborough County is committed to economic stability for sustainable development and are committed to a better future and a stronger region once this pandemic has been overcome. And I would remind this body that our region and this state are the most dangerous geographical areas in the union per capita for automobiles striking and killing pedestrians and bicyclists. I personally secured over 3,000 signatures for the All for Transportation initiative from voters that were fed up with traffic congestion, swerving around potholes, and a lack of proper pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that continues to put people's lives, people's families in jeopardy all over the Hillsborough County. Ensuring our ability as a county to safely and efficiently move around is and will always be paramount to the economic recovery, to our economic recovery, and to our economic strength. signaling economic stability by setting a public hearing on the transportation surtax ordinance as a backup transportation revenue source shows real leadership, and I appreciate all of those who continue to work towards that goal. And I am frankly frustrated that this body failed to move forward today with the transportation surtax ordinance. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the communications and digital media team and the rest of the county staff as well for their great work in these trying times, and y'all's leadership as well. Thank you.
Vivian Handy. Vivian Handy. Gwen Myers. Gwen Myers. Nicole Perry. Nicole Perry. Mary Ellen Gottlieb.
Can you show me something?
Pardon me? Is that Ms. Gottlieb? Ms. Gottlieb? Karen Michalski. Karen Michalski. Right. James Davison. James Davison. Sharon Calvert.
This is Sharon. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners Miller, White, Berman, and Hagan, for voting no on agenda item F2. Your vote displays your compassion, good judgment, and simple common sense in a time of a health crisis and economic devastation. We are in a time that's not normal in any sense, and there's so much uncertainty. Today seems light years away economically than 2018. Your discussion on the unemployment claims brings to heart the impact locally, as many lost their jobs over the last 3 weeks. Many businesses were forced to close through no fault of their own. Everyone was told to hunker down at home to stay healthy, and the county is even under a curfew. The pandemic and its economic devastation has wreaked havoc with people's lives and livelihoods. And while the federal government on one hand is sending out rescue checks this week to struggling Americans, it's not time for the county to be pursuing taking some of those funds away with the other hand. The pandemic is causing paradigm shifts in many areas, including transit, transportation, telecommuting, telemedicine, teleeducation. The transit choice rider may have somewhat disappeared at this point because they may prefer the safety of their own car or individual vehicle, at least for some period of time. While less than 2% used transit in Hillsborough before the coronavirus, the pandemic has negatively impacted transit ridership everywhere. Yet this particular transit tax do-over would force taxpayers to hand HART 40%, or about $6.5 billion of the total proceeds over 30 years, and there was no questions asked. HART never asked the county for that money, and HART's never even presented any plan to the county for how to spend all of those billions. The pandemic may change the entire transit playing field. Pinellas and Orange counties wisely backed off pursuing similar tax hikes referendums for November. And so it is good to hear that Hillsborough is doing that as well. A sales tax is regressive that hurts the low income and small businesses the most, and they are who are greatly suffering today. The tax raises the cost of all commercial leases that many small businesses use. No one knows now what the total impacts of the virus pandemic will be, but we do know that the county and all of us will have to step back to reassess many things, and that includes transportation and transit. Thank you again for voting no and displaying that your focus at this time is on the health and well-being of your constituents and not a sales tax. Thank you.
Doug Jessup. Doug Jessup. Russell Kahn. Russell Kahn. Karen Jaroch.
Yes, thank you. This is Karen Jaroch. I live in Northwest Hillsborough County. People are suffering economically and physically, and so thank you for hearing their pleas. This virus represents a paradigm shift in how we interact in our public square the way 9/11 was to airline travel. When the virus broke out, Hillsborough County advised the public to quote, avoid riding public transit for their safety. This tax locks in a minimum of 40% to transit and rail projects while we are in the midst of seismic shifts in transportation technology. These changes aren't only in Tampa Bay, but nationwide, ridership has dropped steadily since 2014. This pandemic has shifted the future of transit even more. We can't project 1 year down the line, let alone 30 long years. We learned that buses and passenger trains are the biggest vector of germ transmission in New York City, where 1,900 of MTA's employees have tested positive for coronavirus, about 3 times the rate for New York City as a whole. And sadly, 50 MTA employees have died. New York Metro accounts for 44% of all transit ridership in the nation. As of April 12th, the same region represents 47% of all COVID-19 deaths in the nation. As a result of this virus, ridership in New York City is down 93%, and it remains to be seen if it will ever rebound to prior existing ridership numbers. To the point that transit is cheaper, it's really much more expensive overall. Take Sunrail, the commuter rail system in Orlando. While the fare is only $2 each way, that's only what the rider pays. The actual cost per trip in 2018 is $42 each way, or an astounding $84 a day per commuter. It would be cheaper to offer our riders Heart Plus door-to-door paratransit service than rail service. Even cheaper would be to provide free Uber service to these riders than operating a rail service. Road and transit needs will change, and we need to reassess priorities. We need flexibility that this tax doesn't offer. It's 30 long years instead of a more reasonable 10 or 20. The tax, as proposed, prohibits funds to build new roads and widen existing ones. School board member Cindy Stewart eloquently expressed the school district's dire unmet road needs at an MPO meeting earlier this year. A new middle school is opening in August on Baum Road, a 2-lane road in a South County neighborhood with only one way in and out. The new school maxes out with 3,000 students on day 1. There are no plans for improving or widening. The school board has 38 new schools planned over the next 15 years, 20 planned in the fast-growing South County area where many roads are F-rated. Egregiously, there are no transportation plans for the widening and new road capacity needing for any of these new schools. The MPO planned to spend the sales tax allocated $0 to build these new school roads. With the sales tax, developers pay less in mobility fees. Without the tax, developers pay more in mobility fees for their road impacts, while the taxpayer keeps more in their pocket.
Roach, time is up.
Telework is the fastest.
Mr. Roach, time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Gattens.
Yes, Tom Gatens here. I don't want to belabor these points because the board voted properly and with the best interest of the community in mind. I want to thank Commissioners Miller, Hagan, White, and Merman. Thank you all very much for your thoughtfulness in this consideration. We don't need to go into this, but the one thing that hasn't been discussed, I just tap on this point and then I'll let it go. This is the first wave of the coronavirus, and all the best estimates is there will be a second wave. Your vote today recognizes that we don't know certain things, and your prudence here is going to be demonstrated come next year when we likely will have a second outbreak and a potentially worse one. I just want to salute the 4 of you and ask the other 3 to reconsider their political posturing and think what's best for the community long term. Sharon raised great points relative to the use of public transportation and the transmission of these types of viruses. It is the greatest incubator of these problems, and that's why the areas around mass transit in the United States are the areas of the greatest risk. Thank you very much, and bless you all for your effort. Thank you.
George Neiman. George Neiman. Richard Riley.
Hello, yes, I'm on.
Who?
Hello, yes, I'm on.
Good. George Neiman, you recognize.
Commissioner George Neiman here.
You recognize,
May I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to just say I'm glad that the board voted the way they did. We have the pandemic still raging. We have the quickest economic downturn in history with over 7.1 million unemployed nationally. and we've got mandated state orders to stay at home. We've got a curfew. It's almost like martial law. And to even consider, I know that there are political forces that say this is more important than anything, but I really believe that this is the wrong time. It really is. Another point I would like to make is that this meeting, this virtual meeting, and the last one really leaves a lot to be desired. I have to say, I wasn't allowed to submit a visual presentation, and visual is just as important as oral. And I think in a participatory democracy, we should really be able, if you can't do it well, and I can't share my views in a visual format and make a full presentation in front of my peers, not just the commission, then I think we've lost a lot. And it's not the type of government we should have. So I know you want to keep moving forward with this backup tax, but I think it's not the right time, and I think others have expressed it better than I could. We've got major issues. We've got a lot of folks unemployed, and I think we really need to rethink this. And here's my suggestion. If we postpone the discussion and hopefully we have some kind of economic turnaround, but it's really not clear. Some of the analysts are saying we may not see any benefit to the economy until next year or even beyond. So I would say at this point, when we do open up discussions, which I'm sure some will next year, you will have time to think about preparing. If you want to do a referendum, you will have time to prepare it properly and tell the truth, and maybe revise it to say that we're going to apply a lot of that money to the roads, which is what the people want. The people want their cars, and they don't want to be on a crowded bus transmitting disease. So please think about that. And in the meantime, you'll have plenty of time, which you haven't addressed, and you really should, is make growth pay for itself. Please. We're stuck with, the bill is coming to us, and it's the wrong person to come to, really.
Name your time
it should
is up.
go to the developers.
Name when your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Raleigh. Richard Raleigh. Nancy Stevens. Nancy Stevens. Dottie Grover Skipper. Dottie Grover Skipper. Tabitha Pellegrin. Tabitha Pellegrin.
Hello, this is Tabitha Pellegrin.
Okay, you recognize?
Hello. Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, and thank you for listening to my comment. I want to specifically thank Commissioners Miller, Merman, Hagan, and White for voting to not repeal or rescind their prior votes on this ongoing tax. I feel as a voter here in District 4 that the language that was in that ballot initiative was confusing at best. And I'm an educated individual. I work in the legal field, and many of the issues on the ballot were contradictory. You thought you wanted to vote for one thing, but not another. So I think while people did want to increase money to take care of roads, not everybody was looking for mass transit. And one thing I looked at, as I do each day, is I look at the zip codes of the virus spread in our area. And I noticed today, while everybody was talking about what's going on in New York, and we see the numbers up there, and we see how the virus has spread, and we are all aware of the mass transit up there, that while we look at the numbers, the zip codes away from the Tampa area, there's a lot less numbers condensed of the virus that are out. I used to live in Miami, Florida, and that is an absolute mess. There is transit there. And people do use it, but again, you know, it takes a long time to get from your vehicle from place one to place two, so people do use it more, and we see the numbers there. But I also wanted to bring up another thing that I read in the paper probably about last summer, and it was talking about the trolley that is funded. Initially, they were asking people to pay for trolley rides, and they found that when people had to pay for the trolley rides, the trolley wasn't used. Then all of a sudden, when the trolleys were subsidized by the taxpayers, then they were talking about, the Tampa Tribune talked about how amazing it was that all the people were using the trolley. Surprisingly, yes, of course, because it was free. But we can't really afford to keep subsidizing a mass transit or anything else, because when we look at things like Amtrak, we see just in with the monies that went toward the CARES Act, they got $1 million out of the CARE Act for relief. Each year, that Amtrak system runs $194 million in debt. So this is debt that we don't need to have. I saw a lot of people comment on here today about, let's have free rides for people who can't afford it. We cannot afford this. And yes, we need to improve our roads, but mass transit is just not something that we need to implement right now, and definitely not with the virus spread, because that's just a petri dish of germs spreading out in wider areas. So I thank those of you who are not going to rescind your vote. And I also wanted to speak quickly on the C1 issue as to the mobility and impact fees, and I ask that the developers take those up. Thank you so kindly for your time.
Your time is up, Ms. Pellegrin. Thank you. Leonard Mead. Leonard Mead. Tom Rask.
Yes, hi, Tom Rask here. Thanks to Commissioners Miller, White, Hagan, and Merman for rejecting agenda item F2. I appropriately had an F in front of it. It was a complete fail as far as I'm concerned. Commissioner Smith was no doubt pushing hard on this issue because she suspects, as I do, that the Florida Supreme Court is going to throw out the current tax. I agree with Chairman Miller and others that this is not the time to be talking about a tax. Government agencies all over the world, including in high-tax Europe, are bending over backwards to lessen the tax burdens on individuals and businesses alike. They aren't doing this out of any change of heart on the whole issue of tax pressure, but they're doing it because they understand the seriousness of the economic situation. I'm not talking about the health situation, the economic situation. There's a long history in Hillsborough County of bait and switch on transportation issues. The word transportation is used to justify taxes that never actually resolve transportation issues. When the word transportation is used in any tax proposal, it actually means transit and anything but road. It's a classic case of selling the sizzle but never delivering the steak dinner. In fact, among the callers and among the commissioners, you heard what I'm talking about. They use the word transportation and transit interchangeably, even though less than 0.5% of passenger miles are traveled using transit in Hillsborough County. Their claims about what increased transit will do for a community have proven to be untrue all over the United States. Theirs is simply a failed ideology. And what ideologues do is they believe social theories in the form of words on paper more than they believe what data and experience tells them. I agree with everything that Tom Gatens, George Neiman, Karen Jarosh, and Sharon Calver said before. We actually didn't talk